Let's face it, sometimes we have to make really tough decisions in our craft room. Like this stamp. When it first came out, I had to have it. It has lots of my favorite features. A geometric, big background, which means it's versatile. Tone on tone, bold and bright. Use it with a gel print, use it with any medium, any colors, and it will work with any occasion. So what happened? Fast forward a couple of years, and this poor stamp has never been used. And it ended up on my why am I keeping this pile. I kept on keeping it, thinking of how versatile it was. But in my most recent destash, I finally made up my mind to let it go. And it finally made it downstairs to the basement, waiting to be sent to someone else. And then I found this on Instagram, and I ran down to the basement to retrieve the stamp. This stamp is perfect to get this look, and all the original excitement of buying it came right back to me. I grabbed my MISTI in a 6-inch square piece of white cardstock. This will give me more options later on when I'm assembling the card. And I grabbed the latest in the lineup of black inks that I've been auditioning since my last favorite is no longer available. This one is called Cloud 9 Solid Black from Lisa Horton, and I'm giving it a try for the first time. It's on a firm foam pad, and it stamps a really dark solid black, which makes me very happy. And it says it works with alcohol markers as well as watercolors. One thing I've learned is that I should have left it a little bit longer to dry before I moved to my next step, which was to customize the stamp a little bit. First, I put some anti-static powder over the whole design, and I grabbed my old Versamark embossing pen. This thing is so old, and it ended up causing me a little trouble later on. But I wanted to add another ring to the stamp design, and I wanted it to be silver. The nice thing is that since the design is a little wonky, I didn't need to worry about whether I was drawing a perfect circle, which I definitely was not. I poured my silver embossing powder over top, and I could see there were areas where the pen line wasn't even. And I could also see that there were a few little specks sticking to the black lines of the stamped image, as well as my hand-drawn circle thing. I heated up the panel in my foil-lined shoebox lid, and that not only melted the embossing powder, but it dried the black ink as well. It may not have even been wet at this point. Yesterday, when I tested it with my Copic markers, it didn't smudge at all, even though I pretty much colored straight after stamping. But maybe dry enough for coloring is different than dry enough for embossing powder. Once it had cooled down, I got out the inspiration, and I chose a bunch of Copic markers. I want my coloring to be mostly in the blue tones, but I like the pops of other colors in the inspiration, so I added in a yellow and a magenta. Now I see that there are kind of areas that are dark with color and some that are lighter with areas left white. So I started with the darker side, thinking it'll be easier to fill in everything than to decide how much to leave white. I worked my way through a couple of my blue markers, trying to be random with it, and then I figured I'd better get the yellow and magenta in there so that it would feel like it was random, but also well-spaced, if you know what I mean. I kind of sectioned off about a third of the circle for this darker, fully colored area, and I was careful not to go over the silver embossing, just in case it might ruin my marker tips. So the dark part is done, and I'm really liking it. It's got a really artistic feel. But now, the scary part. I looked at the inspiration again with my brain absolutely screaming at me to try and find the pattern so I could get it right. But alas, it appears to be truly random. So I just started. I went color by color, and I tried to remember to stop after each one to just take a second to step back and take a look. I left out that dark navy altogether in a further attempt to achieve some contrast between the darker section and this lighter section. Once my coloring was all finished, I decided to go back over that silver line with the Versamark pen and give it another layer of silver embossing. There's lots of ways I could have customized this stamp other than just one line of silver. I could have done this with a black Copic to match with the rest of the lines. I could have done several lines so that the length of each section was similar to the others. And of course, there's endless ways to color it. I stuck pretty close to my inspiration, but I could have also split up the dark area and made 2 or 3 dark areas. There's lots of options. So I re-embossed the silver, and then I decided to re-stamp the black and emboss that with clear. If I were doing this again, I'm not sure I would do this step, because that led to black ink sitting on my silver embossing powder, which I smudged a little bit as I tried to wipe it off. But live and learn, and overall, I'm still happy with this. Now, to create a card with it, I had 2 ideas. The first was to trim it down and make my standard 4¼ inch square card. But in the end, I opted to go with a rectangle so I could get some of the edges of the design in the card. Also, I knew that my die-cut sentiment would cover quite a bit of the real estate on a square card, and that just didn't seem worth it after all that coloring and embossing. I held up another panel of white cardstock so that I could decide on the position of the rectangle die, and whether I wanted more of the dark side or more of the light side. I chose to go with more of the dark side. Then going back to my inspiration, I added some yellow ink blending around the edge of the colored circle. This really brought out those few little colored slivers of yellow inside the design, and it added quite a bit of warmth to the card. To finish the card, I added a birthday sentiment from what has to be my new favorite die set from Concord and 9th. Everyday Expressions, I think it's called. Cute font, not too big, and cuts like a dream. My only complaint is that I have lost that dot from the eye every single time I've cut it. But you know me, I always have lots of extras on hand. I added the panel to a white card base. That narrow white frame will tie in with the line weight of the sentiment die cut really well. And then finally, I added some sparkle with gems from Crafty Meraki. Oh, and look, I used the rest on the inside of the card. Do you have a tough time destashing things? One of the things I struggle with is letting go of something that I made a really good card with. So now I'm thinking this one will be moving back upstairs to my craft room, at least for a little while. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.